A very good afternoon to all of our respected guests here at Hilton Bali, and also a warm welcome to everyone who is joining us virtually from all around the world. Please allow me to introduce myself. My name is Talia from Iria's Communication Department, and I will be your MC today. Welcome to a hybrid webinar, Circular Economy for a Stronger Recovery, a Just Transition Agenda for G20, which is co-organized by the Economic Research Institute for ASEAN and East Asia together with GIZ. Economic disruptions during the pandemic have brought to light the urgency of the transition to more sustainable consumption and production. The circular economy comes from the idea that resources, when adequately treated and regenerated, can become a source of sustainable economic growth, aided by eco-innovation while preserving the natural capital. Compared to a linear economy, a circular economy encourages greater collaboration between economic actors and can become a powerful source for climate change mitigation, biodiversity conservation, and reducing local pollution impacts. This is critical to identify opportunities to shift swiftly toward a more just, equal, and circular society. We hope that the insights from the keynotes and panel discussion today can guide policymakers to address the opportunities and barriers, providing recommendations for a common framework to accelerate just transition with examples of measures that have proven effective all around the world. Without further ado, let us hear an opening remark by the Chief Operating Officer of IRIA, Mr. Koji Hachiyama. Mr. Hachiyama, please.
Thank you very much. Ibn Mokti, Hamdiani, lead co-chair of G20, Task Force 3. Distinguished speakers, leading experts from public and private sectors, participants from academia, think tanks, civil society, and international organizations. Good afternoon, all. On behalf of organizers, it is with great pleasure that I welcome you to this high-level dialogue on circular economy for a stronger recovery, a just transition agenda for G20. This dialogue is as timely as it is crucial, not only in the light of the global economic recovery from the pandemic, but also in terms of what the G20 says about the state of the transition to sustainable and inclusive growth. We continue to live in unprecedented times. G20 countries account for approximately 75% of global material use and 80% of global greenhouse gas emissions. Thus, G20 governments play a key role in working toward increased resources, efficiency, and material circularity. While the average resources productivity of G20 grew about 40% between year 2000 and 2019, just before the pandemic, more improvements in resource productivity are projected to take place in the future. Unless further efforts are taken to close the material loop, the growing volumes of resources used will result in significant environmental pressures, including land degradation, carbon dioxide emissions, and dispersion of toxic substances such as in the natural environments. With benefit in environment, economic, and social domains, there is a clear rationale for not only G20 countries, but also for other developing countries and emerging economies to further advance the transition to a more circular economy. At the sub-regional level, circular economy has emerged as an important agenda for Association for Southeast Asian Nation, ASEAN, as part of its comprehensive economic recovery framework. Economic Research Institute for ASEAN and East Asia, EWE area, is instrumental in organizing the several technical studies, stakeholders dialogues, and training programs that lead to the development of an implementation plan, thus providing a platform of exchanging views among stakeholders, emerging policy experience, and good practice. By embarking on the circular economy path, countries can attract responsible foreign investment, create jobs, and address climate change. When looking at, at the untapped opportunities for stronger recovery based on the circular economy principles, let me highlight 3 points. First, the global economy is at a historical turning point where industrial, energy, and economic structures are undergoing transformative changes. COVID-19 has expedited the deployment of digital technologies in every part of our daily activities and business operations. The circular economy elements need to be synchronized with digital technologies and big data management system. Second, the efficiency of circular economy transition is manifested in having a supply chain approach. Circular supply chain management aimed at eliminating waste and continual use of resource along the supply chain through new product design and processes innovations. Central to these initiatives is the reconfiguration of current production and consumption patterns with integrated products and service models. Third, the deliverables and the political environment towards circular business models are changing at new and faster ones. It is not defined solely by technology threats or opportunities, but one with increased and shifting market uncertainties, financing, and investment risk. For in this transition, government and business must adopt, evolve, and innovate together. Excellency, ladies and gentlemen, today's forum, designed in hybrid model, is a perfect opportunity to take our debates for the G20 leads, as well as environment, economic, and finance ministers. Based on your insights, we can present a common G20 policy vision on the circular economy for different levels of government and foster international cooperation among G20 members and with others. Your presence today reflects the importance of these issues and the strengths of our shared commitment to sustainable growth and stronger recovery. Thank you very much for joining us today. I wish you all an interesting and productive deliberation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hachiyama, for your remarks. And now, please let us welcome the lead co-chair of the T20 Task Force 3, Dr. Mukti Handayani Suyahmun. Dr. Mukti, please.
Thank you, Talia. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. First, I would like to thank Mr. Koji Hachiyama, the Chief Operating Officer of AREA, for your remarks that already, in a way, bring us to the issue and update us also on the not only the G20 situation, but also the regional situation. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm very grateful to see you all, both that you are here in this room in Bali, in the beautiful and recovering Bali, as well as those are online. So on behalf of the Task Force 3 of T20, which is on governing climate target, energy transition and environmental environmental protection, I would say. I would like to thank the Economic Research Institute for ASEAN and East Asia area, and especially Dr. Anbu Mozi, and also the Deutsche Gesellschaft für internationale Zusammenarbeit, or GIZ, for co-organizing this important hybrid event. This afternoon, we will have a session to discuss about circular economy with the topic of circular economy for a stronger recovery, a just transition agenda for G20. The topic, as already also mentioned earlier by Mr. Hachiyama, this topic is very timely for the current situation, as at least from the TF3 perspective, as we globally now transitioning and moving towards a net zero emission world, as agreed by countries and parties to the Paris Agreement. Our effort cannot be done solely by considering technical elements as well as political one, but more importantly also this has to consider the socio-economic impacts to the people. This is when a transition can be defined as a just transition one. So, and also on top of it, circular economy, as we know, has played, is playing, and also will play a significant role in managing the use of resources in a more efficient manner, changing the way we manage our resources from a linear pathway to a circular one will affect our contribution to the changing climate. We need to take this path to better tackling the challenges of climate change. Not only that, the circular pathway will also help us and help our effort in biodiversity conservation and reducing local pollution. So, ladies and gentlemen, this afternoon we will hear addresses and keynote speeches, and then to be followed by, as I understand, a panel discussion, and also insight from the G20. So I do hope we can all learn from our resource persons, but also learn from each other and exchange experiences and knowledge among us. So let us enjoy the session, and I thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Mukti, for your remarks. Now, I would like to invite Mr. Nicolas Bouchot, a fellow of the Global Solutions Initiative, who will deliver the keynote speech on behalf of Her Excellency Isabella Teixeira, the co-chair of International Resource Panel, former Minister of Environment, Brazil.
Thank you very much. In fact, Isabella Teixeira was to be with us virtually today, but was called upon former President Lula as he currently campaigning, so she could hardly refuse, and she is currently in the field campaigning. However, she insisted on delivering a few remarks, considering both the relevance of the session set up by AREA today, and also acknowledging the importance of the role of the T20 in that regard. So I will read what we have prepared and what she has prepared and wanted to share with you today. Dear Dr. Koji Hachiyama, Chief Operating Officer of AREA, dear Dr. Anbomoji, dear colleagues from the G20 and T20, dear friends, dear colleagues, I was very pleased to receive AREA's invitation for today's important meeting to promote circular economy and convince G20 leaders they do need to pay more attention to resources preservation in challenging times. As you know, the G20 was initially designed to address economic crises. The Asian crisis in the 90s with ministers, the global financial crisis in 2008 with the leaders. Therefore, how are issues of natural resources depletion, environmental preservation, biodiversity to be featured high on such a macroeconomic agenda? How can addressing them through the G20 can contribute to reduce environmental but also macroeconomic and even global security risks. Well, what goes for climate and net zero trajectories should also go at the same level with the same necessarily ambitious will for resources. As Minister of the Environment of Brazil at the time of the COP21 in Paris and lately as the co-chair of the UNEP International Resource Panel, I wish to underline the role of circular economy to reach out to the climate goals, all the more as the latest IPCC report shows that we are lagging behind the Paris Agreement targets. Since the outbreak of the COVID-19 pandemic in 2020, the world has witnessed a brief pause as a global lockdown put the economy on hold. Skies became clearer, water became cleaner all over the planet. In the meantime, however, hundreds of millions of people suddenly were without any revenue. Many kids could no longer get an education, especially in countries, regions, cities, neighborhoods where digitalization is still lagging behind. The level of circularity in the world economy has declined below 10% since then, whereas some convincing studies shows that, on the contrary, doubling it by 2030 or in the next 10 years would allow to boost the delivery of the climate goals. Then we need to reverse post-pandemic trends and reposition circular economy on the right pathway, cognizant of the many risks triggered by the current disruptions in supply and value chains, further aggravated by inflation and the debt crisis. In the present context, interconnecting our efforts with the climate talks, especially ahead of the upcoming COP27 in Egypt, is necessary, but this is not enough. The future of circular economy is indeed by far and large a matter of development, or as Area has introduced it for the present meeting, a matter of a just transition, which I know is a priority for Indonesia as well. So together with a number of experts gathered in the room today, we have formed a sounding board to direct circular economy solutions dialogue with GIZ and the Global Solutions Initiative. Last year, in that context, we had a very good discussion with the OECD, and this year with the Asian Development Institute, which recently issued a good report about the state of circular economy in developing Asia. With the International Resource Panel, we have conducted what I believe to be innovative research connecting industry issues and urbanization issues, especially in Southeast Asia. It is in the same spirit that I recognize the value and interest of the intersecting editorial project and the concept of moving from extracting to intersecting brought up by Professor Milindo Chakrabarty in India. Dear colleagues, dear friends, Dr. Admbomoji, I cannot be with you today in person as I was mobilized in the last minute by pressing domestic political issues. And as you know, Brazil will soon hold its next presidential elections, and we need to proactively advocate for environmental priorities to be among the main federal priorities for the next months and years. My main message today, besides supporting this discussion, is to call on the G20 and our friends from Indonesia to push for circular economy to be listed as a global macroeconomic priority. And you mentioned, Dr. Hashiyama, already at the ASEAN recovery framework, and no longer as a secondary way to fix some broken parts of the global supply and value chains. We must succeed in delivering a global treaty about plastics. We must build on regional and global efforts, such as the Global Alliance for Circular Economy and Resources initiative initiated by the EU, or the ASEAN Economic Framework, to develop actively waste to energy, and other processes at large in urban areas, and in particular megalopolis, but also in rural areas. We must consider all options to develop circular economy, including the outcomes of the G20 Saudi Arabia circular carbon economy and of the G20 Italy about urban circular economy. We must innovate at all scales in the making of global policies, and as Europe is facing an unprecedented energy crisis, and the war in Ukraine is triggering numerous systemic impacts, the issue of circular economy is becoming even more strategic. But how to consolidate efforts in the long term? It will only be done with the people, of course, with governments, with the private sector, with experts, but with people, and in particular the younger generations, should they be convinced of new ways to foster well-being aside from detrimental forms of GDP growth. We need to foster a pact between generations, and it is about well-being and lifestyles and what future we want to build. Circular economy without social justice will not succeed, and circular economy only in cities will not succeed. As Indonesia is chairing the G20 this year, India next year, and likely Brazil in 2024, it is more than the right time to review and repurpose development models, development economy, and the rural-urban linkages. The future of circular economy also lies in the development of a new bioeconomy, whereby agriculture, food production, biomass valuation on land and at sea would form a continuum, including nature-based solutions at the crossroads of biodiversity and climate protection and corresponding infrastructure systems and sustainable finance. This is how, from a triple economic, social, and environmental perspective, investing in circular economy will contribute to reduce global macroeconomic risks and other global security risks, starting at the local, even sometimes at the grassroots level. Dear friends, dear colleagues, we have little time to move on as there will be no pause in global affairs in the next weeks and months. Therefore, the role of think tanks and the academic community has never been as critical as today to provide insightful ideas, proposals, and recommendations, which is exactly what today's meeting held ahead of the G20 Indonesia by area is meant for. I'm looking forward to hearing and sharing your conclusions and challenge them on the way to the G20 Brazil. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Busho. Next, allow me to welcome the Director of Research, Strategy and Innovation from the Economic Research Institute for ASEAN and East Asia. Please welcome Dr. Venkatachalam Ambumozi.
Good afternoon, everybody, and it is my great pleasure to be here with you and, this afternoon and to share some of our thoughts about the circular economy and how it can contribute for the stronger recovery with a focus on the supply chains and how existing supply chains could be bended or could be made more circular, and what are the opportunities, obstacles, and as well as ways for moving towards we come together and particularly the G20 economies. Next one, please. Today we are going to discuss about the G20, and we know that is the G20 is a forum of advanced economies and then developing economies and also emerging economies. Together, and they constitute 60% of the population, 80% of the world GDP, and nearly 75% of trade, and 80% of the greenhouse gas emissions. But if you zoom in, and this G20 countries make up approximately 70% of the material use. All type of materials, minerals, fossil fuels, biomass, metals, whatever that is you count. If this current trends of consumption of G20s continue, and this is World Resource Panel give the figure, and by 2060, G20 will be consuming 112 gigatons of these materials. So this material use and the emissions will become a challenge for the sustainable development. And also when we are thinking about these net zero targets, they need to be tackled. This is the common challenge for the G20. Next one, please. But if you look into this economic structure of the G20 countries, it varies depending upon their resource endowments, the developmental stage, demographies, and economic specialization. As such, the resource productivity levels of the G20 countries and their per capita material consumption are very heterogeneous. But countries, we can find some of the trends. The countries with the highest resource productivity tend to be the economies that focus on the service sector and high-value products. As of now, by 2020, the G20 countries make up approximately 60% of the global waste trade by weight, and that constitute metals about 60%, the paper 30%, and the plastics 4%. Next one, please. The largest exporters of the waste and the scrap, particularly when we focus on the metals, in 2020 are US, Germany, Japan, and France. And the largest importers of these resources, that is waste resources, are China, Turkey, and India. The metal scrap and this carbon recycling that is we discussed yesterday, which accounted for nearly 80% of this G20 traded value by volume. Next slide, please. Then comes this model of circular economy. What are the circular economy? And there may be a wide differences in the interpretations. Next slide, please. But it is basically a regenerative model that is focusing on building a new type of paradigm, I think, at the G20 level and the other countries. And focusing on improving the resource efficiency, resilience of the economy, and bringing the sustainable growth for all the countries. At the G20 level, the first discussion about the resource efficiency and the circular economy started the German presidency into 2017. And it developed a kind of a dialogue and providing the kind of a platform for different exchange of opinions. Then Japan, and then 2019, and it taken up that agenda. G20 proposed the concept of the circular economy, and 2020 Saudi Arabia got it endorsed at the G20 level. This is where it is a kind of a defining moment for the G20. The global circular economy concept and the framework conditions has been accepted. But what, next slide please. And what this circular economy means for global value chains. Indeed, that is when we think about the circular value chain, it is aiming at recycling, remanufacturing, and reusing of waste materials and continued use of resources along the supply chain. So it is basically transforming this linear value chain in the production process and also the consumption patterns, so that is no resources left going to the landfills. So in a nutshell, the central to this is changing the consumption and the production pattern that will lead into resource recovery, product life extension, and bringing the new types of models of the product service systems. So eventually it will lead into CO2 reductions or the net zero economy. Next slide, please. But this circular economy model of recycling, reusing, and removing these carbons as well as the resources has a kind of a new structural model for changing the current developmental patterns. But we found, and this could be, this process could be aided, and this transformation, the circular economy, could be accelerated by marrying the another concept of Industry 4.0 or circular economy. And by bringing these two paradigms, we established through the economic analysis, we can bring more integration and more innovation and more inclusion. Next slide, please. So IRIA conducted in the past 7 years, we conducted a series of studies that is focusing on this circular economy and the public-private partnerships, as well as the technologies. Our first study focused on the corporate and the policy pathways for circular economy. Then it is followed by how this digital economy and the circular economy could empower ASEAN. For some of the foreigners in this room, ASEAN is a community of 10 small and medium-sized economies coming together to achieve the economic integration and finding a sustainable pathways. So we do have the studies on the marine plastic debris, and then we do have developed some kind of representation. There is a readiness mechanism for the circular economy. And eventually these all lead into a kind of circular economic roadmap for the region, and that has been contributing for the ASEAN economic community pillars. Next slide, please. So what could be the commonalities between marrying this digital economy, the smart cities, and the circular economy? And here there are 3 commonalities. One is both these paradigms looking for a transformational changes in the business models of the industries. We are not talking about the transition, but it is a transformational. Second thing is both the models are looking at how this new integrated product and service systems will be offered to the consumers. So here it is a very much consumer-centric. It is a people-centric, we can say. The additional value that comes from the consumers. Third one is we are not talking about the modular innovations. It is talking about the innovations along the supply chains for enhanced the economic resilience. This is the commonalities, but all this transition has an impact. And we also think, that is next slide please. This transition to a circular economy that is aided by the Industry 4.0 or the digital economy have an impact. And these impacts are differentiated. In the particular the ASEAN level, and we conducted this study for the 10 economies, and we found the impacts differ by product and sector. There is a strong job creation potential for sectors like electronics, and given the high labor intensity of these activities, and that also favor repair, maintenance, upgrading of manufacturing of these things. If we coming to these other resource intensive sectors like oil and gas, mining and forestry, we find there exists a job creation potential for adapting the circular value chains and the circular models, and but it is a moderate. And another emerging sector where it can involve with the more employment opportunities, the building sector or the construction sector. We also, our model predicts there could be a negative impacts in the case of job losses at the local level when we are moving into a kind of different paradigm. Particularly most of these losers are the food production and processing and the textile sectors. But overall, if you look into this region, 10 regions, we found this net job creation is positive for adopting this paradigm. Once we know these benefits and the cost, then we need to assess how we can measure the readiness of countries that preparing for embracing this circular economy paradigm. We developed area to area, we developed a self-assessment tool that could be utilized by the policymakers or the sectors as well as the firms that can see the readiness to embrace these key procedural changes at the firm level, at the policy level. So we developed about 110 indicators, and some are referred to this Saudi Arabia COPSAC's contributions, and we inherited some of these indicators. And then we put it together, and we went for the consultation, and we made sure that is this tool and these indicators are, one is actionable, not very conceptual, but actionable by the policymakers and the firms. And second is the context natural, that it is kind of common understandings of independent of the cost and the time. Third, it is also consensus. It's basically, we had a kind of several consultations with the private sector and the policymakers. This tool is available in our website. You can access it. Next one, please. The next question that is come when we discuss about the transition and this circular economy, and when you are marrying it to the digital economy, is all about the innovations. Whether the global south is ready for it. The answer is yes and no. And here the developing countries, particularly in this region, the Southeast Asia and East Asia, and also countries like Brazil and India, and they have relatively greater innovation efficiency. Where it comes, this innovation efficiency comes by looking into their inputs on the R&D and then IP, etc., into the high-tech exports and the trademarks. Here we find an encouraging signals. But at the same time, and these countries are lagging behind the advanced economies, particularly the OECD countries, in terms of innovations, inputs and outputs. Here we need to develop an international framework and the cooperation framework. Innovations also happening at the different levels, at the policy levels. And we find most of this region in the global south, it is particularly in the ASEAN, these circular economy concepts are based upon the 3R principles: reduce, recycle, and reuse. And among these regulatory instruments, kind of a product standards, recyclement, content for requirements, and the life cycle analysis and EPRs, extended producer responsibilities, are coming out. And basically it is an evolving paradigm and more to be done based on the market principles. Next slide, please. And here the cities particularly also playing a major role in the transition to the circular economy. There is a substantial momentum that is happening at the local level in the transition to the circular economy. And as we can see, that is the Ecotown. It is a kind of a innovation that has happened in Japan. There are about 26 projects that is Ecotowns has been established by bringing together this new type of industries. And when we asked what are these towns, what is the major driving factors for adopting this circular economic model, we found the climate change is one of the driving factors. Second thing is the job creation, new type of job creation. And third one is availability of the new business models and the technological development. This is for advanced countries like Japan. But if you look into the emerging economies, for like in Jakarta and Bangkok, basically the first attempt to include the circular economy policies is based upon the waste management. Here, if you look into the Bangkok and the waste, there is a municipal solid waste management. Basically, now it has been increased from 1.03 kg per person to nearly 215 kg per person within the framework of 10 years. Only 15% of them are properly managed. So we need to invent this circular economy, provided opportunities how it could be, the waste could be transformed into other forms of energy, and like energy and the material forms. Next one, please. So where there is a different type of policy responses are evolving at the regional level and also at the global level. But we need to further find an kind of a gaps, the policy gaps, particularly enhancing this readiness of this circular economy. And here find there are about 6 areas that have a kind of a supportive role for accelerating this transition. That includes the higher education and training, and the good market efficiency, then the labor market efficiency, and the new type of financial market development, and the technological readiness. And the market size also matters. So given the diversity of G20, yes, it has been reflected in the ASEAN, and we need to assess individual countries' capacity, their environments, and also their basic needs. That's why we propose and we developed a series of policy briefs in cooperation with the GIZ and under the T20 framework. And we identified there are 4 priority areas where G20 that is consists of emerging economies, advanced economies, and the small and medium-sized economies can come together. These 4 areas are one is that is standard, harmonization and the mutual recognition of the circular products and services. I think here COPSAC we provided as a kind of a framework, or they identified a categorization of these products and services. And second thing is the trade openness and the trade facilitation in the circular goods and services. And then third one is the enhanced role for innovation, digitalization, and emerging technologies. And fourth, our policy brief recommends directly to G20 to look into this competitive, sustainable finance and innovative ESG investments. So G20 may wanted to look into it, and also I urge the panel to take these issues and how we can cooperate together for a sustainable growth and also stronger recovery. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Ambu. Now, I would like to welcome our next speakers, Dr. Anders Caroline Schepp, Executive Director, Global Parliament of Mayors Secretariat, The Hague, the Netherlands.
Thank you. It's an honor to be here, and quite unexpectedly, because 2 days ago I was enjoying my holiday on Bali, and today I'm here. Thank you very much for the invitation, President. Thank you, Nicolaas, for being here. I want to share, I'm the Executive Director of the GPM Secretariat in The Hague, the Netherlands, and I'm very happy to share some general ideas of the Global Parliament of Mayors and see how the policy of our mayors can join the considerations of your forum of today. First of all, some general observations about the Global Parliament of Mayors. The Global Parliament of Mayors is a governance body for, by and of mayors, strictly, exclusively for mayors, that advocates for to be acknowledged as equal partners in building global governance for an inclusive and sustainable world. The idea of the, let's say that we have a lot of members, and about 50% of our members represent the Global South, by the way. The idea of the Global Parliament of Mayors was born in 2016 from the ideas that over half of world's populations will live in cities and metropolitan regions in 2050. An increasing number of tasks is being delegated from national governments to cities and regions. And cities contribute more than 85% to the GNI of their nations. Yet, cities, their mayors, they are not heard at the tables where international decisions being made. Decisions to address the global challenges such as migration, climate change, health issues that need to be solved in cities. So the Global Parliament of Mayors is convinced that cities play a key role in addressing the urgent global issues and must work together with national governments and international organizations to make it work. The goal of the Global Parliament of Mayors is to empower cities to play an important role on the international stage, engaging in global strategies with national states and international organizations such as the United Nations, and to bring local knowledge to the table. Mayors are focused, the mayors of the Global Parliament of Mayors are focused on developing, sharing, and adopting action-oriented solutions. I think that is a key word also for today, action-oriented solutions. Key notions of the GPM are democracy, interdependency, and increasing empowerment of cities. Also renewing of health policies and promoting effective Green Deals. And a final key notions is, again, and I repeat it, key action-oriented solutions. Partners of the GPM are at the moment the U7. We are partner in the U7 Alliance to advise G7 on specific urban issues. As a matter of fact, next week there will be a meeting of the urban development ministers in Potsdam, Germany, and we are very happy that our chair, the mayor of Mannheim, Peter Kurz, is invited to be in this specific meeting. Other partners of the GPM are OECD, who was partner of our annual summit in Katowice last month, UN Habitat, and we also have very good contact with UCLG, the US Conference of Mayors, Eurocities, all national, international frameworks where mayors are coming together. Finally, a specific remark on the policy of the GPM regarding the economic recovery. And I just want to mention a part of our roadmap. We have a roadmap for the coming year, and there is a specific item on economic recovery. The GPM believes that economic recovery is not just a return to normal. The crisis will be deep and lasting, not the least because of the geopolitical instability and inflation. Rebuilding the economy must include more bottom-up policies, focusing on existing local resources so as to spread the benefits, and based on an economy whose foundation is recycling and circular thinking, where everyone can play a part in overall urban development plans. To be successful, the recovery plan should build on a constructive coalition between the forces of the market, public initiative and services, and the commons and voluntary sector. The new urban economies will be more sustainable and more socially inclusive. Mayors will have to determine their local ecosystem in which the new economy is included in urban vision. Well, let me finish by these words, and I hope that certain elements can come back in the discussion. The GPM, the Global Parliament of Mayors, is open to discuss initiative with you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Andershep. And now moving on to the next agenda, the panel session, which will discuss innovative technologies and financial innovations, or a circular low-carbon economy, opportunities for G20. Please allow me to welcome our moderator of the day, Mr. Nicolas Bouchot, a fellow of the Global Solution Initiative Berlin. And also please allow me to welcome distinguished speakers for the session. Mr. Konstantinos Karampor Niotis, partner at Living Prospects Circular Economy Advocaten, European Union. Ms. Nora Monsuri, a senior fellow, King Abdullah Petroleum Studies and Research Center. Also, Mr. Anuj Mehta, Director of Southeast Asia Department of Asian Development Bank. Ms. Caroline Schall, Director of Institutional Relations, SICTOM Paris. Mr. Tadahiro Kaneko, Head of Sustainability, Sumitomo Mitsui Banking Corporation, and Mr. Kari Herlevy, Project Director, Circular Economy, Finnish Innovation Fund Citra. Please applause for our speakers.
Thank you very much. So we can start our discussions with all our partners online and connected. Thank you so much, because it's across huge time differences in Europe. It's quite early, Japan a bit later than today. Thank you for introducing this session and our panel discussion. The idea of this panel discussion was not to overload you with presentations. In the next days in the T20 summit, there will be plenty of opportunities to share presentations and to share good insights. And we also didn't want to overload us with, I would say, too much technical commitments, etc. But to use this convening afternoon, while outside the climate is inviting us to relax, to use this moment to share a few insights from the, I would say, considerable wealth of experience and expertise that is gathered around this physical and virtual table. And when Dr. Anbumoji designed the session, he insisted that we kind of go into some practicalities, but also illustrate potential working directions and for the future. Hence, the idea is to share a series of opening insights from our distinguished panelists that were presented minutes ago, and at any time, right, we are in this room with also experts. Really feel free to raise a question or to join in the discussion so that we can accommodate perspectives. The conversation is also online, so I very much welcome all the participants which have joined on the Zoom connection virtually. Please also feel free to interact. We have made sure that your questions or insights, remarks and observations can be accommodated during the session, not just as part of a final 5 minutes Q&A session. So this is it. And I would maybe ask who would like to start first by sharing a few insights. Konstantinos, maybe, and then we will pass it on to Noura Mansouri from CAPSAC. Kostas, please take the mic.
Does it work?
Yeah, it works.
Cool.
Floor is yours.
Thank you. So thanks, Nicolas. Actually, I feel a bit disorientated. I had a discussion earlier with Suva. Jet lag was not that kind to me this past couple of days. But anyway, thanks a lot for the invitation, especially to Dr. Anbumoji, and also for the GIZ colleague that co-organized this session. I will start with statistics. It's always good to start with statistics. Normally, statistics doesn't fail you. This does not apply to Greece. We have a different type of creating statistics. So, by 2050, consumption-wise, we will be needing a couple of more planets in order to ensure that the demand of materials will be met. Having said that, again, consumption-wise, as regards finite and infinite materials will be doubled. For example, biomass, metals, minerals, fossil fuels will be doubled by 2050. And this will also lead to an increase by 70% of waste generation. Intentionally, I didn't create any slide pack for this intervention because most of the times when I do so, my technical side kicks in and I focus only on technical facts. But when we talk about the circular economy and the transition to circular economy and nature regeneration and biosphere protection and the improvement of the living quality of people, there's always a romantic and not a technical side. And we should always think also from this romantic side for these particular issues. In my intervention, I will be discussing in 3 layers. Nicolas, if I start speak gibberish, please stop me anytime. I don't want to use all the time, but how many minutes do we have? Like 5-10 minutes?
You have 4 minutes.
4 minutes left?
Yes.
4 minutes,
But
your 4 minutes or 4 minutes?
4 real minutes.
Okay.
But you will have time to get back to
Okay, cool.
4 minutes
So,
for the opening insights.
Okay. So I will be having, let's say, 3 layers in my intervention. The first will be the worldwide discussion on how the economic system works. The second will be mostly related to my region, the European Union, and how it acts and how it fostered for the past 15 years, 12, 13 years, the transition to the circular economy. And the third layer would be a project-based approach based on takeaways and results from a project that was co-led by GIZ, the German Agency for International Partnerships, and GSI, the Global Solutions Initiative, a global network, enterprise, collaborative enterprise and network of think tanks. These 2 agencies both led a multi-year project and organized a series of dialogues with circular economy experts from around the world. And in these past 2 years, we discussed a lot the topics, several topics related to the circular economy. But having said all that, can we all agree that if we follow the current economic system, the system that is based on the interrelated action of consumption and production that are decisive for the use and allocation of resources, eventually the system will collapse? I mean, this is not, to my eyes, this is a rhetorical question, actually, yeah? Because, and also it's, it's not an Orwellian example or a dystopian reality. This is our future. We are writing our future, and this is what we're going to get in the very near future. I mean, if we could ask an animal or an ecosystem, if an animal or an ecosystem could speak, definitely, based on facts, would tell you that the past is better than the future. The outlook is negative for our biosphere, and we are part of the biosphere. Modern societies are based on a mix of economic systems using capitalism and socialism, these systems, mainly. Other systems as well, but mainly these systems. But the free markets has failed. The free market has failed to mimic the natural systems, how the natural systems works and preserve themselves for billions of years. So, in my view, now there is a need for governmental intervention in these markets in terms of creating the enabling policies for the shift to for advancing, the private initiative and private ownership to rethink and redesign resource efficiency, innovation, and productivity. I think I can stop here. And
thank
Nicola,
you.
I see your eyes that you need me to stop.
Always look in my eyes. Always. No, but we will continue. But on here, I think we have something very important that you introduce in our discussion this afternoon. That is the level of regulation in different markets at different scales. And very concretely, this resonates with the session we had in the beginning of that week with the governor of Jakarta and also a couple of players in the room. And at the Jakarta Investment, that was the Urban 20, and at the Jakarta Investment Forum, and on several occasions, not only the governor of Jakarta, the mayor of Rotterdam, and a number of other mayors insisted on this question of whether we can continue to go on with free markets, especially on a number of issues, or whether it should be regulated and by whom and how, etc. And we are at this exact moment where those, I would say, critical questions are entering into the equation. I would like to turn to Anuj. Anuj Mehta, are you online with us? The Director of Southeast Asia Department at the Asian Development Bank. Yes, Anuj. You have an incredible, I would say, track record and profile. You have been working in the private banking, JP Morgan, and then now you are the head of the ASEAN catalytic green finance facility, right? Working on climate finance, blended finance, and so on. How would you characterize the issue of circular economy, especially in the ASEAN, in the context of the ASEAN comprehensive recovery framework, and the possibility to kind of regulate or introduce new financial parameters in the discussion of resources management? I don't know if that works. All right, we will go back to Anuj in a second when the technicality. So we'll try to get online. Otherwise, Tadahiro Kaneko, who is the head of sustainability at Sumitomo Mitsui Banking. Is Tadahiro connected, or do we have a little bit of technical issue?
Hello.
Tadahiro, we can hear you
Yes.
well. Tadahiro,
Thank you. Yeah.
maybe from a different perspective, because at this moment, I saw you are also very much involved in energy issues and especially the development of hydrogen. But maybe a few opening insights for our discussion. You heard the overall opening comments and remarks, and we are entering like into this crisp question of how to regulate markets related to circular economy. So maybe a few opening remarks from your experience at this moment.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Yeah, you talked about my hydrogen-related initiative a little bit. And yes, I was thinking about introducing some financial transactions we started to see experience through my slides. If I can introduce my slides to the audience, yes.
Yes, we can see them. Please go on.
Thank you. Thank you.
But briefly for this first tour de table, and then we can go back. Right?
Okay, okay. So, for example, on page, let's see, page 7, 6. Sorry, page before. Yes, this one. As you can see on the left-hand side, for example, in this July, we could close one green loan transaction with Japanese globally operated packaging company, Rengo, based on international green loan standards. And this is to support their investment in a biomass power plant as well as cellulose particle plant. And if you see left-hand bottom, on the same page, in May, we closed our finance to Akreda Bank in Cambodia to improve the agricultural sector's access to finance. And we would like not only to support the decarbonization and facilitate sustainability from energy supply side, represented by the former example, but also to facilitate the green operation of energy demand side. And I was impressed by the doctor's presentation earlier that highlighting the supply chain and demand side, and thinking again about this sort of product cases. And on the next page, the same page, sorry, same page on the right-hand bottom, there's another hydrogen-related financing case that is in French Guiana in South Africa. This is really an energy transaction in a relatively specific economic and energy conditions in this particular country. But in this country, there is a huge need of the energy transition from diesel oil to the hydrogen related and also the renewable related power energy. So this is the kind of very advanced case for the financing transaction for hydrogen-related projects, which is at this exact moment globally relatively at the early stage, like feasibility studies. That's my recent experiences. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And we will continuously go from policy frameworks to such projects. I think the connection now is okay with Dr. Anuj Mehta. Yes,
Yes, I hope you can hear you now.
Yeah, that's
Apologies for that.
that's perfect. So across these issues of private initiative and sustainable finance and banking, and the needs to regulate a number of sectors to promote effectively circular economy,
Sure.
as global free market has not provided, as Kostas was mentioning, the conditions to preserve our own livelihoods and biospheres. Maybe a few opening insights as per your
Sure.
experience.
Sure. And I think I'm not going to use my slides in the interest of time, and that will make you happy, I'm sure. So I'll give you three. I'll give you three or four points from my perspective. And obviously, I'm giving you a perspective from the Asian Development Bank and the ASEAN Green Facility that we manage. If I bring all of the story back of circular economy and climate resilience back to numbers. And let's look at the hard facts. So in Asia, you need around 1.7 trillion a year for investment in circular economy, climate resilient infrastructure. And this is a huge number, especially because the financing gap is so massive. 40-50% depending on sector. When you start looking at some of the really more unrevenue generating sectors such as wastewater, coastal protection, mangrove restoration, those areas don't have immediate bankabilities and revenue models, and therefore you tend to see lesser private capital going into that, and maybe less of a priority of governments in terms of financing these projects upfront. So when you look at that and you go into seeing how do we basically do two things: create the kind of projects that will actually directly target circular economy models, create circular economy models, and how do we create innovative finance models that can generate the capital required into such models. That's the biggest challenge. What we've been trying to do, so one is what we call capacity building and pilot project development. So here we say, okay, in circular economy or in green infrastructure, let's identify 6 or 7 models and 6 or 7 pilot areas where we can do things. So coastal protection, which I already mentioned, we're working on that. Blue bonds, we're working on that. We're looking at, for example, biosphere, or there's another initiative which is called Flyways Initiative, which is to try and improve a pathway for bird migration, etc. So we are trying to develop models and saying these are the kind of projects where circular economy solutions could be better used, zero waste recycling, etc. But second, which is, I think, a little bit more important in terms of driving the actual capital required, is green finance solutions. And here I would sort of say two things. One is the use of capital markets. So we've been working heavily on development of green, blue transition bonds to try and sort of, put in place a framework for how bonds can be done. There was a sustainability bond, which was done by the government of Thailand recently. We supported that. And there are many more that we're working on. In fact, we're launching an initiative for green bonds at the end of this month to scale it up across Southeast Asia. The second is what I would call pooled vehicles. So this is a bit like the ASEAN Green Facility, which is a regional vehicle, but saying at national levels, can national governments create these pooled vehicles, or let's say risk mitigation financing vehicles, which can take a little bit of the risk out of the underlying circular economy projects. So an example of that is SDG Indonesia 1, a green finance facility which was created or approved by ADB to support Indonesia earlier this year. So it's a national vehicle. It's got funding from the government and from ADB in it. And it's supposed to be given to projects where you take the risk out of those projects for the first few years, or for the first construction period, or for when you're trying to get environment clearances. And therefore take the risk out of projects, especially if they're unproven, and then try to catalyze 5, 6, 7 times capital from other sources. And that, I think, is a super important model, which I'd advocate heavily for countries to look at. Just to close, we are looking at that also now for biodiversity. In Thailand, which is where I am the country director, we are creating a hub for biodiversity. And this is aligned with Thailand's own strategy for bio, circular, and green growth, BCG they call it. And we are saying if we create a hub with funding for both project preparation, the development of those projects I mentioned earlier, but also a de-risking financing vehicle, that would be the way to push biodiversity projects in Thailand and in Southeast Asia. So I close with that, which is basically saying, the key point is sustainable finance requires public sector and ADB kind of agencies to take risk out of projects, de-risking vehicles, and secondly, for a much bigger focus on capital markets to drive capital from bonds, which could flow into such projects. Let me stop there and hand it back to you.
Thank you so much, in fact, for introducing those notions and parameters, and in particular, we were talking about regulation. You introduced the notion of risk, right? And whenever we are talking about sustainable finance, sustainable infrastructure, turning to, I would say, new parameters that are very in need of considerable amounts of finance, the issue of risks always come first, right, in the equation, and how to mitigate such risks. We have tons of discussions throughout the year with the B20 and the G20, the Long-Term Investors Club, about how to de-risk such investments, and I think we cannot move forward seriously without having this in mind. But I would like to turn, and we will get back to you, so please don't leave the virtual room yet, to our Noura Mansouri, Senior Fellow at King Abdullah Petroleum Studies and Research Center, and one of the key persons behind the major initiatives regarding circular economy called Circular Carbon Economy, which was introduced during the G20 Saudi Arabia and kept as a legacy since then. Maybe a few comments from the perspectives of CCE, and also regarding the issues of regulations and markets and what was mentioned minutes ago by our colleague Anuj. Noura, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Nicola. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you, Dr. Ambo, for the invitation, and Iria and the co-host in this event. So I'll speak from the Saudi perspective on the circular carbon economy. As was mentioned by Nicola, the circular carbon economy framework was formulated by Saudi Arabia. It was endorsed by all G20 countries during the Riyadh 2020 summit, and it offered a new perspective to climate mitigation. So it finds its roots in the circular economy, in that it focuses on the emissions that are attached to these materials and outputs from different cycles in the manufacturing processes. It focuses on 4 pathways, so it adds a 4th R to the traditional 3 Rs that we know in the circular economy. So in addition to the reduce, reuse, and recycle, we add the remove component that removes the greenhouse gas emissions from the system. So it's a closed-loop system that shifts the discussion from the sources of emissions to managing these emissions as enshrined in Article 4 of the Paris Agreement. And these support a number of technologies. These technologies include carbon capture, utilization, and storage, nature-based solution, renewables, nuclear, energy efficiency. So it really supports all energy technologies and keep all the energy options open, which is the much needed flexibility that countries currently need, particularly with the different challenges that we are faced with, starting with the 2020 challenges of COVID-19 and how it impacted and reshuffled priorities for governments, and also ending with the current energy crisis in Europe, triggered by the conflict in the Ukraine, as well as the food crisis, the agriculture crisis, the inflation, and all these immediate concerns that really shift government priorities. So having a flexible approach that takes into consideration national circumstances, that takes into consideration economic growth as well as other priorities is most important in these days. So we'll shed light on the activities that Saudi Arabia has been doing in the field of circular carbon economy. Saudi Arabia is ushering into the new era of meeting net zero targets by 2060, and as part of that roadmap, a lot of initiatives have been announced, including the Saudi Green Initiative and the Middle East Green Initiative to plant 10 billion trees across the country and 40 billion trees across the Middle East region, Saudi is providing funding, partly funding for that. There's already been a lot of, the first phase of the project has already been implemented in Saudi Arabia. 250 million trees have already been planted. And you know, initiatives like these are not affected by geopolitics, right? It's not like the oil and gas industry or other industries that are affected by geopolitics and current affairs. There are also grand plans to include renewables in the energy mix, 50% renewables and 50% gas by 2030. And there are also a lot of investments into alternative energy, such as hydrogen. There was the world's first shipment of blue ammonia going from Saudi Arabia to Japan, and that was using hydrocarbons, clean hydrocarbons for blue ammonia. And there's also plans to build one of the largest green hydrogen plants in Saudi Arabia in the futuristic city of Neom. There are also, Saudi Arabia is also home to the world's largest carbon capture and utilization plant in SABIC. Saudi Aramco, which is the world's most valuable company and one of the largest company, it's the world's most valuable company, has published its sustainability report detailing the decarbonization targets, including, you know, reducing emissions by 15% by 2035 in Scope 1 and Scope 2 greenhouse gases. And there's been a lot of also progress into the renewable energy projects, including the solar Skaka plant, solar plant, and the Domat al-Jandal wind plant, and a lot of, about 35 parks of renewable energy projects are underway. So we're very much heading towards this net zero target by 2060, and with circular carbon economy at the heart of these initiatives.
Thank you very much, Noura. And to complete this first series of opening insights, I would like to turn back to online with Caroline Schall. Caroline, is Caroline online and connected? I think so.
I am. Hello.
Welcome, welcome, Caroline. Welcome back to Indonesia, which you visited last week, this time virtually. So we are introducing with you a different perspective. You are one of the directors of the Greater Paris Authority for Waste, Household Waste. But with this, you've got also another view about circular economy, secondary markets, and so on and so on. So as a first series of insights regarding innovative technologies and financial innovations for circular low carbon economy, what lessons would you maybe share from your visit to Indonesia and also the agreement that you have signed with sister companies in Jakarta, or from your global experience? And I might just add something for Caroline, because I know she's working on that, but for the rest of our discussions and our distinguished panelists, the issue of the Agenda 2030 and of the SDGs, right? I don't want that we forget completely that on the way, especially because next year, there is a review of an important SDG, which is SDG 11 on sustainable cities and communities, but also SDG 6 or 9, I never remember, but Caroline knows.
6, 9, 11, and 17.
And 6 is about sanitation partly, right? And 9 is about industrial development, and the 17th is about partnership. So, Caroline, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Thank you for this opportunity to speak about one of my obsessions, waste management. It's not very glamorous. The link between waste management and climate change is not so direct because in the world, the carbon emissions from waste treatment is less than 5%. So it seems to be very low. In fact, we don't know exactly how to measure our emissions from landfill properly treated landfill or a wide landfill. But that's why I think because the reason why during the COP21 and in the Agenda 2030, the very gifted people who had written all these beautiful principles, they have totally forgot, or maybe overlooked the problem of waste management. First of all, if you don't have water, you die. If you have too many waste, you don't die. It's just a problem of cleaning. It's a problem of smells. It's ugly. It's disgusting. But in a lot of countries, it is not the first subject, the first topic. And local authorities have so many subjects to take into account. It is probably one of the reasons waste management is not so fashionable. We are lucky because, and it is a paradox, the discovery a few years ago of the incredible amount of waste in the oceans, in the rivers, was frightened us. And that's the moment we make maybe a link between waste management, poorly waste management, and the resources of the planet which have to be preserved. I'm speaking to you on behalf of the SICTOM. SICTOM is the first French public authority managing household waste from the Greater Paris regions. 6 million inhabitants and 2.3 million of household waste treated every year in our 10 facilities in Paris and around Paris. Given our experience and the relationships we have built in countries that are very different from us, I can also speak for local authorities all over the world who are struggling with this issue. Separately and together, we need to take up the following challenge. How can we deal with cities being overwhelmed by waste in a cost-effective way and repeat this kind of miracle every single day? In a laconic phrase, SDG 11.6 places a responsibility for the collection, treatment, and recycling of waste on local authorities without giving them any further guidance on the matter. So, how should they proceed? To inflict the least possible harm, several factors need to be combined. Clear controlled allocation of political and administrative remits, coherent legal measures, and for me, it's a very important point, an effective private sector that addresses the needs defined by public authorities with a view to equal treatment of all citizens. Another point, infrastructures that are appropriate for local geography and climate and with the potential for facilities to be pooled. Another point, a robust local taxation distributed fairly between all waste producers in order to fund collection and treatment solutions and viable processing systems to transform materials and allow reuse. As you see, as you know, the principle of free administration in local authorities is a key for cities, including local taxes revenue. Efficient waste treatment depends on an ability to invest and maintain industrial infrastructures and smaller installations, the commitment of women and men who operate them, and of course, research and development. Today, the industrial solutions exist. It is never a technology problem. Technologies exist. Some of them are needs huge facilities. Some of them are more affordable, and they have proved their viability. But this remains costly, in particular when it comes to complying, as they should, with generally accepted environmental standards. For instance, the cost of waste-to-energy units included, if you want to do it properly, 30% of the cost for fumes treatment. It's a very, very hard process. Responsible waste collection and treatment is at present a cost. It remains a cost. There is no business model allows public authorities or the private partners to deliver a service that is 100% equitable as well as profitable. Today, and it's sad, but the reality, waste is not a financial resource for those dealing with it. As yet, it is still a cost. Now, I would invite you to consider how we could produce a report detailing our difficulties and expressing the urgent needs for states and cities to be allowed to adopt made-to-measure solutions as appropriate for local context. Probably the next high-level political forum gives us this opportunity.
Caroline, thank you very much. We will get back to that. You have introduced also another important variable in our discussion, which is the fact that at some point we need transformations, such as in the waste management, waste collections, waste to energy, and so on, right? In many situations, fiscal policies do not allow that to do that properly, and there is always the kind of mirage that, yeah, the private sector will deal with that, or that the additions of micro projects will deal with that, and the situations will be solved. And we can see that in the meantime, there is a tsunami of waste that is produced by continuously growing urban trends, and that there is no forecast that this should end up soon. So there is a cost, and the cost has to be borne by the society one way or another. And I'm sure that our partners, especially in the banking sector here around the table, will have a few insights about that. And that's all the more important then to review the SDGs, and especially, I would say, the framework of SDG 11, you mentioned that, which has completely forgotten these issues in the beginning when they were formed in 2015, and to put that on new rails. And probably institutions like ERIA across Southeast Asia, Japan, and so on can help with that. And we heard also Isabella from Brazil. It needs to be a global effort. I will turn in a second to Caroline Shep, who was kind enough to join us on stage. Maybe she has also a few notes or remarks. But before that, I would like to share a few questions that were raised online also. So we have participants from Vietnam who are raising the issues of low-tech and the role of low-tech in developing a circular economy or new innovative solutions. That was mentioned also by the opening insights of Nbomoji, and that was mentioned by Isabella Teixeira. From Africa, we have several participants from Africa around the table today who are raising the question of social enterprises. Also, I think this is an interesting societal dimension. Our colleagues from Costa Rica, actually based in Indonesia, but from Costa Rica, about bioresources and other and education. Sorry, the issue of bioresources is also emerging from the chat, as well as how to include people, common people with common habits, in sometimes too high-flying discussions. So out of those questions, we promised we would mention them. We may not be giving full answers, but is anyone want to pick up any of the topic? Low tech, common people, common habits, social enterprises, bioresources, education? Noor? Yeah, Noura?
Thank you, Nicolas. So I just thought I'd add some or shed some light on the co-benefits that we get from focusing on nature-based solutions, particularly the blue carbon economy. So as part of the Saudi Green Initiative, and as you know, Saudi Arabia is a water-stressed country, as is the case in the MENA region and the Middle East. So the greening initiative that I spoke about, a big part of it is the blue carbon economy. So it's actually using seawater to plant mangroves and other ecosystem plantations. And this by itself provides a lot of co-benefits for the local communities, but also for for the ecosystem and for nature. And it also mitigates some of the risks that are found in regular forestation, for instance, fires, so you don't get fires under the sea. So I think focusing on nature-based solutions is great because it provides that co-benefit.
Thank you very much. Kostas?
Thanks, Nicola. Actually, I feel like a small child in a chocolate factory in these discussions. It's so interesting and so many points to being raised and to discuss. I will pick up two things, the one that Caroline raised and also Ambu raised before. It's about the need for transformational changes instead of incremental. The circular economy cannot work in silos. It's a global thing that needs this transformational change, that needs innovation, that needs research, that needs the people and the social enterprises that the colleague from Africa mentioned. I will share a brief experience from a mission that I recently had in sub-Saharan Africa, and how social enterprises in Africa are very much important based on the setting of how Africa works in order to advance the circular economy and facilitate the transition to the circular economy. Having said that, if I have 5 minutes or even less. Even less, okay. Before we discussed about the, the reason why I'm here is about discussing about how the European Union managed for the past 10 years to shift from the take-make-waste system to the more circular system. And the European Union actually is leading by example. And it managed to achieve this based on a fermenting process that is being on the field for the past 10 years. It started, one key milestone was the Circular Economy Action Plan, right, in 2015. Where a number of more than 50 actions and legislative and non-legislative proposals, mainly related on waste, were delivered. Based on that, several directives and legislative acts were delivered. Then we have on 2020 the second Circular Economy Action Plan, which is a broader agenda and including key value chains and how these value chains will deliver the ultimate goal that is included in the EU's current strategy, the EU Green Deal, that will make the European Union and the continent actually the first one that will achieve neutrality by 2050. I mean, this goal is enormous if you imagine how big this target is. So the European Union is leading by example, and all regions can use this experience because the European Union has advanced. There are so many, let's say for the take-make-waste model, the European Union has managed to understand the production, the take-make concept, and the consumption, the waste concept, and deliver a circle, including the 5 Rs that were mentioned earlier. So having said that, there are too many. I will miss if I started to mention all the all the directives and the actions and strategies from the European Union that can be used for all regions, including Africa and Asia, that were mentioned in the questions, to deliver this transformative, systemic, not systematic, systemic. It's a process that is systemic and transformative.
Just a quick question, Kostas, and then I will turn to Anbu about the specific point, EU, Asia or ASEAN collaboration. There are a number of channels that have been opened for some time, right, on different topics ranging from technical cooperation to sustainable finance to regulatory systems to all sorts of legal and fiscal affairs linked with that. But this is the policy framework, what you have presented. And a brief comment maybe on how much the current economic crisis, right, which is tantamount, is impacting positively, neutrally, or negatively the delivery of new directions regarding circular economy. Maybe just one remark about that, and we can further elaborate.
Yeah, just a quick remark that the circular economy, if it would be widely applied, and it's a model that could be widely applied, then the problems related to energy and disrupted circular supply chains would not be a problem, because the circular economy provides solutions to these problems. So if we had advanced in the circular economy transition, then these problems wouldn't be that hard to solve.
Thank you, Kostas. Anbu, you heard the different bits and pieces of our discussions. The puzzle is not yet complete, but there are more and more elements on our table. So, apropos both the local initiatives and the sustainable community, social enterprises, and the, I would say, the larger scale geopolitics of regional, inter-regional cooperation, maybe a few comments at this stage of our discussion?
I'll take up that is the question that is coming from the online, this technology and the social enterprise, and yes, Constance mentioned, and what we are looking for is a kind of a transformation, not the transition, and in this case, we need to look into this technology. I think CAPSAR has developed a category of the technologies that include these kind of existing technologies. I'll tell an experience, and it is a very short experience, but it's a real thing that has happened, how this social capital is utilized or maximized to bring in the technologies. The story goes to a small village or the small forest community in Okayama Prefecture, Japan. And this community, it is like a kind of a Denny in the developing country, and they are far away from the market and far away from the knowledge sources, and they don't have the access to the technologies. And it is a forest community, and they use these forest products for the livelihood, for the industrial products, and then for the welfare of the society. And one day the government put the regulation, and they bring it, and particularly the Ministry of Industry and Trade said this barks that has been from the trees, it is an industrial product. And they changed the regulations. It is no more a kind of forestry product, and which has the value. And second thing is the Environmental Ministry brought these things. They can no more burn this waste. And this, then this community, basically, it is a very small community. There is only two industries. One is the brick making, and another is the this agriculture. And these people think about it, and they said this is a small community, and they don't have this access to the technology. Then they developed a partnership with the university, and which has the kind of developed locally appropriated technologies for the community. They developed the knowledge partnership, and then second thing, they introduced a kind of a community financing, and it is a kind of a crowd financing to bring in the technologies. So it transferred within the 3 years, and it is a kind of a social capital that already existed, and they come together and they believed, I think there is a common goal, and they put into it, and they transformed this forestry waste into, one is that energy stream, and another is the kind of a new product, that is that it's a hybrid bricks, and third one is the biofuel, and this was sent into the prefectural market. This was the classical example where this is the kind of the technology access, the appropriate technologies could be brought in, and the social capital could be enhanced, and they found within the 3 years there are 5 more new industries. There is a kind of new type of industry they didn't think about it.
Thank you very much. So from one technology to the other, from very small scale to large scale, we are navigating constantly within these dimensions. I would like to hear back maybe from Caroline about this, because as one of the managers of a public authorities that invests over €500 million every year, right, for waste management, transformation, circular economy, etc. We are not talking here about small-scale projects, but also then maybe afterwards our colleague Tadahiro about hydrogen, and Noura certainly will have comments on that, because hydrogen, you develop high-end sophisticated projects, but it is also becoming one global source of energy, right? So it would be interesting. But maybe, Caroline, a brief comment about small-scale, experimental, including international cooperation, and how does this work and connect or not when you have to manage transformation at a system of 7-10 million inhabitants?
Every solutions are good. What I wanted to say when I was speaking about technologies, we know them, even the very local technologies which respond to local needs when there is no possibility of pooling of transportation. We are helping a lot of them, even in the area of the SICTOM, and in very large and well-developed society, like in France, like in Europe. These local initiatives, cheapest most of time, to repair or reuse manufactured products, for instance, they are a good thing from a social and educational point of view, but it doesn't allow massive day-to-day treatment of the volumes generated in urban centers. Though, for instance, all over the world, a lot of scientists are looking how to transform, how to treat all the waste we hope to sort out of the oceans, out of the rivers. Now, most of these waste are dirty, they are contaminated most of the time, and we don't have proper solutions to treat them and to transfer them in second raw materials in a good sanitary process. It's a kind of development we are looking for. In Kazakhstan, when we are managing some projects, development projects with the local authorities, it's another kind of problem. This is the 7th largest country in the world, with maybe only 20 million of inhabitants, and all villages, all small cities from 10,000 inhabitants are very far away from each other. So there is no possibility to pool infrastructures, and cities have to develop proper solutions. And now the technologies are available to do that, but very expensive for a small country in a very wild region. So that's why all local initiatives to repair, reuse, and to transform manufactured produce are good, but at a scale of the level of needs, they are only complementary and they are not the solutions. I don't want to be the speaker of industrial solutions. It is not my purpose, but both have now, until we have waste, until we are not able to reduce the production of waste, all solutions have to live together.
Thank you very much, Caroline. Tadahiro Kaneko, are you still online?
Yes.
So I think you hear the conversation developing, and regarding this, in particular, the questions of models of innovation, and maybe contradicting a little bit the easy, let's do projects and scale them up. It never works, right, to address systemic transformation, especially in fields which are very greedy and hungry in terms of capital, scientific innovation, and so on. So where would you position the development of hydrogen in this moment, either from a perspective of Japan or from a perspective of transnational global cooperation?
Yeah, that's thank you. That's really interesting and exciting question. There's some comment when we discuss hydrogen. Someone may say that we may follow the route of LNG development, But on the other hand, if we look at the reality of hydrogen, hydrogen can be created in multiple ways, and the supply chain is very diverse. So if we, for example, talk about regulations related to hydrogen, currently in the world, the regulations around hydrogen is pretty fragmented, and basically treating hydrogen as a chemical ingredient, not as a daily energy source such as gasoline. So when we discuss regulation around hydrogen, we really are now discussing that we need to make some policy proposal to come up with a singly integrated regulational form, like hydrogen basic law or anything like that, treating regarding hydrogen as a daily regular source of energy that can support the domestic as well as the international logistics. That's one very crucial point, which is not really easy, and we really need to be very innovative, even for the government side.
Thank you very much. And the other point maybe related to that is, if I echo what Anuj was mentioning in the making of loans or financial support by international financial institutions, how would you characterize at this very moment the level of integration of hydrogen as a new source of energy, right, region-wide, such as with the ASEAN Comprehensive Recovery Framework, or in a more global perspective? Is it there yet, or is it still, I would say, very specific or supported maybe more by private banking than by international or multilateral banking institutions?
Thank you. Yeah, I kind of liaise with Anuj's comment that such a circular economy type of initiative may need strong governmental support and probably equity capital markets money rather than the senior lending. And the reason why this I agree with him is that, as I mentioned before, the total value chain from the upstream to downstream of hydrogen tends to be very long. And every time we think about financing any of those projects, in order to come up with a nice structure of financing, we always have to pay attention to the stable existence of stable demand, which is always coming from the demand side of the long value chain. But on the other hand, recently, there are lots of news flow about the new projects around the hydrogen. And the vast majority of those are upstream. So in order to make up on the financing transactions, we really have to connect this demand coming from the bottom line, downstream of the supply chain, to the upstream upcoming projects in front of us. That's always the current most severe challenge we face. And we really hope that governmental entity may be a bit more innovative to support the bridging of these between the two. Thank you.
Thank you indeed. These are very, very important and interesting and important points to take into account. And then to respond to you or to complement from the perspective of the Asian Development Bank about analyzing emergence of new markets and how sustainable or unsustainable will the demand be in emerging contexts or emerging issues, plus this question of how to complement support to grassroots or local initiatives and system change. How would you view the reconciliation of such different approaches, Anuj?
I think just if I can understand the question correctly, you're looking at both sort of national level initiatives as well as local level initiatives to bring in solutions. And so there are two ways, right? One is really sort of the community driven development model, where you're developing pilots at very local levels, where you're working, for example, with coastal communities and fishing communities on creating those projects which really tap into what makes it sustainable sustainable from a using perspective. We used to see models of, especially waste treatment, a few years ago in some of the South Asian countries, with good examples from the government of putting money aside. Waste treatment plants would be set up, for example, and not used. So, or silos where, for example, you're supposed to try and reduce the wastage from agriculture not getting used by farmers. So, the models, for example, of creating a cooperative, which, allows farmers to benefit from productivity, or working with the tourism industry, which then links up with fishing industry. So that's grassroots level, working with the models. But the critical aspect is scale up. And for scaling up, one of the big options is to work with development banks locally, or development finance institutions in the countries who've got the reach and who can create these financing products which allow not one, but 100 different projects to happen. And so, there is, and as an example, we launched maybe about a year and a half ago in Jakarta, actually, in Indonesia, a focus on a blue hub, basically, which essentially was trying to say that if we want to create projects which are sustainable and scaled up, we need to create the financing facility for ocean's health. So this is plastic pollution treatment, wastewater treatment, industrial effluents, etc. But we also need to do SME scaling up. So this is working with the UNDP and with ADB, saying let's focus on cities as well as SMEs who are in the business of waste treatment, and see what we can do to improve their business models, they improve their financing structures, and therefore expand what they can do while also trying to create pilot projects. So it's like a three-pronged approach. Pilot projects, find the local companies which can actually expand the business and provide large-scale financing at a national level, which can then sort of permeate down into whatever technologies or whatever models are actually working effectively. What, of course, it means is linking that financing with very strong impact indicators so that the money is actually being used appropriately and being monitored on its effectiveness. I hope that helps to answer the question. Back to you.
That more than helps, and thank you also for these very precise points. I will turn briefly to our colleague Caroline Schepp. So you were dragged into this conversation recently, but the president of the Global Parliament of Mayors, right, is one of the founder of the Urban 7 Alliance, that is a new group of the civil society within the G7, advocating for urban issues to be part of the G7 global agenda. And having had a discussion when this was information earlier on in Berlin during the Global Solutions Summit, we heard a lot also about collaborating across the space of the G7 and the G20, right? So collaboration, collaboration, collaboration. But sometimes it's not so easy, like to interconnect different scales, ranges of issues, or etc. Just from the experience of the questions raised through the network, Global Parliament of Mayors, and from also your experience in working with its president, Peter Kurz, the mayor of Mannheim, maybe a quick feedback on the discussions so far regarding the ability to drive transformation in time, because time is always so short and the needs are huge.
Well, that's a difficult question. First of all, and I can only echo what you just said, collaboration is the key word in the GPM. Collaboration between mayors, between cities. There is this key definition of interdependency. We are convinced that all cities and all levels of government are related to each other. We should work together. Echo the words of my neighbor, is we cannot work in silos. That is also what our chair repeats in every speech that he has. We cannot work in silos. We have to work together. There are beautiful examples on local level of successes with circular economy. Let them inspire, all kinds of level, all kinds of enterprises that are looking for right examples. There's so much done already. We should make use of that. My message is, let's break down the silos and work together on local, national, international level private enterprises, voluntary capacity, etc., etc. Bring everything together. Time is not on our side. There is a very urgent issue before us, and like you said, the external circumstances are not very favorable to what we aim in the coming years. So that is my main message. I believe it will reflect a little bit what my chair would say in this situation. Finally, I want to react to what the lady with the beautiful name of Caroline Shaw just said on waste management. This is really one of the top 3 priorities, the biggest issues of mayors within the Global Parliament of Mayors. Every conversation that I have with mayors from the Global South, especially from the Global South, they start with the issue of waste management and how they have to approach that. So I'm really open to, after this panel, after this event, to get connected with Caroline Char in France, I believe, to see how we can inspire each other and how we can help mayors, you know, with very small example, because that is what we say. It should come from bottom up to a next level.
Thank you very much. And Anbu and also Mr. Koji, I think you cannot escape the issue of waste, right, in the conclusions of this specific workshop. There are other issues. It may not be always the most attractive one, but definitely, right, Costas, we cannot completely escape the issue of waste. So here, dear colleagues, we are sort of midway in our discussion, and I would like to give you a few hints about how we propose to manage it till the next hour. We have had a wonderful roundtable of insights, and we are entering into our discussion. We will have soon a short coffee break, and also our colleagues online can refill, but please stay with us. But before this coffee break, we have one more thing I would like to briefly discuss with you. But also, if anyone in the room would like to enter into the discussions, we have colleagues from the Australian National University, from the Center for Energy and Water in India. I see Shuva here, from Task Force 3 and the Indonesian research on decarbonization, and from Algeria and from Italy. So really, and from Berlin. So really, if you have any points you want to put into our discussion, really feel free. We are here in a working mode, but then maybe that will also help trigger the conversation. The next issue I would like, before our short break, and we will also hear from our colleague from Finland, from Sitra, briefly through a recorded video message, is how everything we are talking about, from blue energy and large scale and local and mayors and grassroots and transformation and education and so on, how can we channel that through the G20, right? In terms of operation, like T20, T20 communique, G20 and so on, right? But also in a more general way, how can we push concretely? I would like just to hear from our ideas from the European perspective, Saudi perspective, Mayor's perspective, and Bu's perspective, and others about that. So here's it. At quarter from 5 here, we will make a short 15 minutes coffee break, and so it's a networking coffee break. But then in the next 15 minutes, I would like us to try to touch upon this issue a little bit. So please, I saw a hand over there from our colleague from Australian National University, right? So we have mics. Please feel free to enter right into our discussion. Yes, no. Is the mic working? I don't think so. You sure? Yeah, we can hear.
We'll try again.
Yes, it works. Good. Please go on. And maybe introduce yourself.
Yes, thank you, Nicolas. My name is Frank Jotzo. I'm a professor at the Australian National University and co-chair of one of the co-chairs of Task Force 3 for the T20. A question for Dr. Mansouri. You explained very well that there should be a fourth R in the list of R's, the removal R, and you explained about Saudi Arabia's plan or beginning facts on hydrogen and ammonia exports. And so we understand that Saudi Arabia produces these future fuels, future clean fuels, both via clean electricity from renewable energy, solar, as well as gas. And the gas-based route, of course, requires carbon capture and storage, which is a form of removal. And so I was wondering whether you could enlighten us about the plans, the future plans in Saudi Arabia as to the mix between green hydrogen and blue hydrogen, and also perhaps, if you can, the experiences that are being made with the production of blue hydrogen and what share of the carbon dioxide can in fact be removed.
Thank you. We will give you the opportunity, Nira, to answer that in a second. It's going a bit beyond our discussion here about circular economy.
Oh, I apologize.
No, please do not, because I think this is also the background of any significant approach to interconnect in the energy issues and circular economy issues. So Noura will be able to elaborate on that in a second. Just, do we have any other remarks from the floor? Yeah, we'll take them all. Please, if you can share the mic to the lady in green.
Merci. Radia Sedawi, I'm the Chief of Energy and Resource Management and Climate Change at the UN Regional Commission of Western Asia and Saudi Arabia as part of my portfolio. And no better place than Indonesia to speak about this aspect of the CC, and I prefer that we keep within this framework, which is the purpose of this side event. I would like also to congratulate you that you brought different pieces of the equation. Maybe I have a comment to complement the spirit of the CC, and then one remark and question. Number one is that...
but please stay concise.
Yeah, sure. There was the different pieces that look at for the macro level, and then we spoke on the different aspects of the value chain, specifically on the minerals and then the fossil fuels. And then my question is that the business model that between the Western and the oil and gas producers specifically, at least I speak about my region, but also applicable for Indonesia, how this new business model from the CCA framework should change with since we spoke about the European experience, and this is my question on that, since the value chain cannot be, if we don't track it through the value chain. And number two, from the for de-risking investment, I was very much interested in the small scale but also medium scale project that was present in terms of de-risking, present on the biodiversity aspect. My question is that how integrated the approach in terms of de-risking this kind of investment, specifically on the carbon credits, as an indicator to basically de-risk this kind of investment, because this is all about that. And number three, a question to the Mayors. Really, I'm very interested to have you here in the panel, and which shows the micro level of involvement of the municipality and great potential that we have in the circular carbon economy framework. So from your perspective, how you see it's not just about waste to energy, but how you see basically the involvement of the Mayors, whether be it an urban or rural, basically, how you see them involved in the climate debate and the contribution at the level of municipalities in order to have this kind of indicators in order to basically report on that and correct the communication. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Caroline. We are taking these points, and also from online, we have a few more hints and remarks, especially one which I like, is about who will do the circular economy, right? Is there an overarching authority like the word circular economy headmaster, or or is it just a constellation and a galaxy of tiny initiatives? Is it just, as Kostas was mentioning, in the EU context, within the EU, but not with the rest of the world? So I think this is a very nice and simple, but also interesting question. So here we are, a couple of questions regarding the role of local governments. Very interesting point, and I think valuable for even afterwards discussions about carbon credits and circular economy. I think this is a big point. Also, a very important question about energy transitioning, right? Green, blue, etc., especially in Saudi Arabia, but as per efforts that were led by Saudi Arabia in the G20 context. So those points. And my initial questions about what would be the some ways, right, but in a very brief time, about how to best continue to address those questions in the G20, right? In the G20 this year, in the G20 next year, in the coming weeks before the G20 summit anyway. So we have plenty of issues and ways to address those questions. So in a few minutes, each and every one, before our coffee break, we will start with Kostas.
We start now, or we have a break?
No, after that we have a break.
Okay, I was trying to dodge a bullet, but okay. So too many things to consider. I will start with how to, well, actually G20 and how to be, to facilitate the transition of the circular economy and convince them about this economic system. Actually, the circular economy is an economic system. So, and also this, I guess this answers the question from the online participant. Economic system, it's an economic system completely different from the GDP-led and growth-related economic systems that currently in place. And it provides solutions. As regards the global value chains related question, I would use the results of, digested results from the CSD, the Circular Economy Solutions Dialogue. It's a dialogue stream that was led by GIZ and GSI, Global Solution Initiative, for the past 2 years. And this resulted in several takeaway messages. I mean, very briefly, we had three dialogue streams, a macro, meso, and micro level dialogue stream. The macro level was about the global value chains, the meso level was the melting pot, the urban discussion, and the micro level was about a value chain, the plastics value chain. As regards the global value chain, there are a couple of messages that will facilitate the transition of the circular economy, the global value chains, is embracing technological pioneers and innovations, decide for disruptive regulations that allow for a new normal, value a system approach for functional material flows, and phase out non-circular production and manufacturing, and operationalize local and multinational circular economy ecosystems. And another point on this would be, and it's really connected with what you mentioned earlier, Caroline, about working in silos, is there is a risk. There is a risk in linear circular value chains and circular-like value chains. There is a risk that the benefits and gains of the actual circular economy, circular value chains, may be used and benefit non-circular value chains. So whatever we create in a circular value chain may be lost completely and benefit non-circular value chains. This is why the transformation change is so important, and the need to apply the circular economy worldwide in all sectors, it's really, really important. Otherwise, again, specific sectors may benefit from others doing the work. I don't know if it's understandable.
It's understandable. Thank you very much, Kostas. It's about sharing the benefits of circular economy and even going beyond the costs of circular economy.
Yeah, the cost is another thing. It's, externalities. And this, I touch upon very, very quickly on the things about financing. We mentioned that the difficulty for de-risking investments and the difficulty for creating pipeline projects, circular pipeline projects. But in the banks, if all the negative externalities of the linear system were considered, then probably they wouldn't finance linear concepts.
Thank you, Kostas. And then maybe Anuj Mehta from the Asian development perspective on either points, but especially about how to move forward, especially through the G20 and maybe in preparation also of the upcoming ASEAN Summit and ASEAN Chairmanship of Indonesia, if you would like. And then I will turn to Tadahiro Kaneko and Caroline Shine online, and we'll finish up by the persons on stage. Are you with us still, Anuj? No? All right. And Tadahiro is still online? Yes, thank you very much. So from the perspectives of that you have developed so far and the issues of financing, but also of driving these conversations through the G20 and other forums, what would you say should be a shared priority?
Okay, thank you very much for the very tough question. And when we talk about this innovative business transformation, we started to face with a discussion of innovation finance. But I think I strongly feel that the innovation around circular economy, as well as on decarbonization, is slightly different from the authentic innovation because of this economic externality. So I would really ask governmental bodies to think about this special nature of externality to come up with some support mechanism for the private sectors. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Caroline Schall for a few final notes, especially regarding maybe the Urban 20, G20 priorities. And thank you again, Tadahiro.
Yes, it was a good surprise for me, this U20. It was the first time that as a public authority, we were part of it. And I was delighted because the governor of Jakarta and also Mayor of Rotterdam made conclusions of the forum, and Governor of Jakarta made the conclusion of our roundtable. And both of them talk a long time about the power of cities and responsibility of cities. Mayor of Rotterdam, answering to the World Bank, told us how it was important to be free in administration for cities, how important it is to be able to decide and to invent tailor-made solution for cities. We are all different. Our stories of administration, of government, of fiscal law are very, very different, and transposition is not of time notable. But we have the same goal, and we are developing together. I think this U20 summit was the first occasion. We are developing together a strong positions, and we could be in the future in order to develop it and to pledge for more liberty, for more freedom for cities at the highest international level. It is a first step. It is probably a very important moment for all authorities who are in order to propose solutions, and even if we don't find them now, we could at least think about them. Thank you.
And I think we have an immediate reaction online. Yes, we can. Yes, we should. But definitely use the moments of these convenings also, not just to comment on existing solutions, but to provide new ways forward. Thank you very much, Caroline. Maybe as a follow-up, if one last remark from Caroline Shep, if you'd like, very briefly, then we'll pass it on to Noura.
So as an answer to your question on how the GPM consider, playing a part in these processes, I'm looking back on what we did as a global parliament of mayors last year when the U7 or the G7 was hosted by the UK. We came together as one of the parties together with the UK core cities. We were heard, but it was an incidental event. This year, we, of course, the G7 under the presidency of Germany, our chair has very good connections on the national scale, and he's actually perhaps the initiative taker, I don't know, but he is in this alliance, U7 alliance, and has a much bigger, the GPM has a much bigger stake in the preparation of the U7 and the advice towards this G7. So the model of this year, and it's not only one event, there are several events planned in the calendar. The GPM, together with partners, already issued a declaration as an inspiration to the G7. The whole model that we are designing this year might be a very good model for other international events to make sure that the voices of mayors is heard.
Thank you so much. And that's the first result is that you are here with us today, right? Noura.
Thank you, Nicola. So let me clarify, I guess, in the beginning, and let's establish that the circular carbon economy is in fact rooted in the circular economy. And I think Dr. Frank Siozzo's question is in fact very relevant. So I'll hope to answer it in my remarks. But I'll start with the question on G20 as a platform. Of course, G20 is an important platform, and the T20 process is important in gathering, this global collaboration on putting together G20 recommendations and preserving that continuity from presidency to presidency. And sometimes the G20 platform offers the flexibility and resilience of climate action. For example, during the 2020 COVID year, COP26 was cancelled or rather delayed. So that year, the G20 filled the gap in multilateralism, and it plays that role when it continues to happen year on year. However, this year, of course, multilateralism is in crisis. We saw an example of that this week when the G20 Working Group on the Environment could not reach consensus, and we hope this is not a continuous trend leading up to the G20 Indonesia summit. So that's one comment on the G20 platform and how to mitigate it. Another comment I'd like to propose is the importance of having the flexibility of the circular economy and the circular carbon economy approach. We saw the current affairs triggered by the conflict in Ukraine derailing the COP26 outcome of namely phasing down unabated coal. And in strict opposition to that, what happened in Europe is reverting back to coal. Even though there are climate targets and there is the Green Deal to be pursued. So having the flexibility of keeping all the energy options open, which is proposed by the circular carbon economy, is important. It offers that flexibility to countries and ensures that climate mitigation is pursued no matter what happens, COVID-19, health priorities, or the war in Ukraine shifting priorities with the energy security. And just to comment on the hydrogen is in fact a cross-cutting technology that crosses over reducing, reusing, recycling, and removing carbon and greenhouse gas emissions. And it's a great opportunity for countries to collaborate at the national level. So we have the Saudi Arabia has done that with Japan, but Saudi Arabia has also now is seeking partnerships and collaborations in Europe and elsewhere with US on hydrogen specifically. So the Gulf Cooperation Council's Interconnection Authority, which is the electricity grid that connects the GCC, but now also Iraq, Egypt, and Jordan, plans to extend all the way to Europe. And through that, you will have golden opportunity for more integration and collaboration across Europe and elsewhere. Thank you.
Thank you. Perfect for also raising the stakes and sharing this large horizon. Thank you very much. Andrew, one last word for this roundtable before we break.
We'll be coming back again or not? Okay, no, on the G20, I think the question and thing is we need to be pragmatic, and the G20 is a global forum, but it has the limitations. It was established to look after the policy coordination among the developing countries and the advanced countries. From that aspect, and there are three expectations for me, and it could be discussed in Indonesia, and also it can be taken to India. One is, I think, setting the targets for the circular economy, and if it is looking at the resource efficiency, decoupling, and what could be the aspirational targets, the global targets. I think that can look in and they can agree on. And second thing is, like a lot of things are happening in the financial field. They established a financial stability board and financial safety net, and they developed a kind of performance indicators. And similarly, G20 can agree on some of the performance indicators in support of this transition. And this performance indicator could be progressive and it could be modular. And second thing, they can do it. And third one is they can do it. What they can do within their limited capacity is creating the demand at the national level. I think that could come from the enhancing their public procurement system, because most of the governments, they are the big purchasers and they are the first consumers, mega consumers of the resources. So they can put their house in order, and so that is they can also create a demand for the circular products and services within their capacity. Thank you.
Thank you very much. A warm round of applause for our distinguished panelists. And thank you so much for those who joined us online. So here we are with a short coffee break. And yes, Andrew, people who are in this room should come back in 10 minutes, but it's just outside of the room. So they will be kindly asked to come back. Thank you again. There will be some material from this session, presentations that were prepared ahead, and comments, and also an excellent video recording from our colleague Kari Herlevi from the Finnish Innovation Fund, Citra, ahead of the next World Circular Economy Forum, which will be this year in the end of the year in Kigali, in Africa. Right, so this will be the full package along with the video recording of the presentation and other inputs that could be shared afterwards. After the break, we will be hearing short, I would say, not closing, but maybe a larger scale insights, although Noura has done that already quite well. Antonio Villafranca, who was kind enough to stay with us the whole afternoon, the Director of Research of the Italian Institute for International Political Studies, and one of the main, I would say, co-chair of, more than co-chair of the G20 Italy last year. And also, I think, Andrew, we will hear about a perspective from India, right? So please stay with us for that. And for the closing remarks, I promise the closing remarks will be also short from our distinguished colleague Holger Kühler, who is in Berlin, advisor for strategic knowledge partnerships at GIZ, but also a very fierce advocate of circular economy. So please stay with us for after the coffee break. And so far, thank you so much, and please enjoy the coffee and the refreshments that are outside.
And also, IRI has prepared a dinner for all of us, all the participants and the panelists in this room. And please stay back and join us the dinner also. Thank you.
Good, thank you.
Resource consumption globally has tripled since 1970, and could double again by 2050 if we continue business as usual. ASEAN's economic resilience is increasingly threatened by resource depletion, environmental degradation, unsustainable consumption, and climate change. Working towards a circular economy can help us address 45% of global greenhouse gas emissions, as well as offering a $4.5 trillion economic opportunity to the world. This has become an imperative for ASEAN, where consumption is growing rapidly. ASEAN needs to adopt an economic model that looks beyond the linear take, make, and dispose process, and make the transition towards a circular approach that is regenerative by design and makes effective use of materials and energy to retain their value. A circular economy thus increases competitiveness for ASEAN businesses, enhances innovation, and promotes green jobs, while reducing environmental pressures. Many businesses have already benefited from the circular approach, improving customer satisfaction, reducing resource and energy use, reducing costs of waste, enhancing brand and image, fostering longer customer relationships, and increasing sales. ASEAN's new framework for the circular economy for the ASEAN Economic Community provides a pathway for the region's transition to a circular economy based on 6 guiding principles. It sets out an ambitious long-term vision that builds on the strengths of existing ASEAN initiatives. The framework for the circular economy delivers inclusive social and sustainable economic growth while increasing resilience for the region. But its implementation is a whole-of-community effort and requires participation from everyone, the public and private sectors as well as the consumers. Visit ASEAN.org for more information. Resource consumption globally has tripled since 1970 and could double again by 2050 if we continue business as usual. ASEAN's economic resilience is increasingly threatened by resource depletion, environmental degradation, unsustainable consumption, and climate change. Working towards a circular economy can help us address 45% of global greenhouse gas emissions, as well as offering a $4.5 trillion economic opportunity to the world. This has become an imperative for ASEAN, where consumption is growing rapidly. ASEAN needs to adopt an economic model that looks beyond the linear take, make, and dispose process, and make the transition towards a circular approach that is regenerative by design and makes effective use of materials and energy to retain their value. A circular economy thus increases competitiveness for ASEAN businesses, enhances innovation, and promotes green jobs, while reducing environmental pressures. Many businesses have already benefited from the circular approach, improving customer satisfaction, reducing resource and energy use, reducing costs of waste, enhancing brand and image, fostering longer customer relationships, and increasing sales. ASEAN's new framework for the circular economy for the ASEAN Economic Community provides a pathway for the region's transition to a circular economy based on 6 guiding principles. It sets out an ambitious long-term vision that builds on the strengths of existing ASEAN initiatives. The framework for the circular economy delivers inclusive social and sustainable economic growth while increasing resilience for the region. But its implementation is a whole-of-community effort and requires participation from everyone, the public and private sectors as well as the consumers. Visit ASEAN.org for more information. Resource consumption globally has tripled since 1970 and could double again by 2050 if we continue business as usual. ASEAN's economic resilience is increasingly threatened by resource depletion, environmental degradation, unsustainable consumption, and climate change. Working towards a circular economy can help us address 45% of global greenhouse gas emissions, as well as offering a $4.5 trillion economic opportunity to the world. This has become an imperative for ASEAN, where consumption is growing rapidly. ASEAN needs to adopt an economic model that looks beyond the linear take, make, and dispose process, and make the transition towards a circular approach that is regenerative by design and makes effective use of materials and energy to retain their value. A circular economy thus increases competitiveness for ASEAN businesses, enhances innovation, and promotes green jobs, while reducing environmental pressures. Many businesses have already benefited from the circular approach, improving customer satisfaction, reducing resource and energy use, reducing costs of waste, enhancing brand and image, fostering longer customer relationships, and increasing sales. ASEAN's new framework for the circular economy for the ASEAN Economic Community provides a pathway for the region's transition to a circular economy based on 6 guiding principles. It sets out an ambitious long-term vision that builds on the strengths of existing ASEAN initiatives. The framework for the circular economy delivers inclusive social and sustainable economic growth while increasing resilience for the region. But its implementation is a whole-of-community effort and requires participation from everyone, the public and private sectors as well as the consumers. Visit ASEAN.org for more information. Resource consumption globally has tripled since 1970 and could double again by 2050 if we continue business as usual. ASEAN's economic resilience is increasingly threatened by resource depletion, environmental degradation, unsustainable consumption, and climate change. Working towards a circular economy can help us address 45% of global greenhouse gas emissions, as well as offering a $4.5 trillion economic opportunity to the world. This has become an imperative for ASEAN, where consumption is growing rapidly. ASEAN needs to adopt an economic model that looks beyond the linear take, make, and dispose process, and make the transition towards a circular approach that is regenerative by design and makes effective use of materials and energy to retain their value. A circular economy thus increases competitiveness for ASEAN businesses, enhances innovation, and promotes green jobs, while reducing environmental pressures. Many businesses have already benefited from the circular approach, improving customer satisfaction, reducing resource and energy use, reducing costs of waste, enhancing brand and image, fostering longer customer relationships, and increasing sales. ASEAN's new framework for the circular economy for the ASEAN Economic Community provides a pathway for the region's transition to a circular economy based on 6 guiding principles. It sets out an ambitious long-term vision that builds on the strengths of existing ASEAN initiatives. The framework for the circular economy delivers inclusive social and sustainable economic growth while increasing resilience for the region. But its implementation is a whole-of-community effort and requires participation from everyone, the public and private sectors as well as the consumers. Visit ASEAN.org for more information.
Ladies and gentlemen, we would like to invite all of you to be seated as the program will resume shortly. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, we hope that you have enjoyed the refreshment. As we'll start the program shortly, first I would like to thank all speakers for sharing their collective wisdom with us today. We have learned a lot from them. And now I would like to welcome Mr. Nicolas Pucho.
Thank you very much. So let's conclude today's journey in the world of circular economy. During the break, a Japanese colleague just told me about new technologies in existing coal power plants to replace coal with other nutrients from circular economy, and that circular economy does represent a possible alternative to coal in times where there is a lot about phasing out coal, but where, such as in Indonesia, coal was really up until now, and even now, a major source of energy, right? So I think this is very encouraging. We are on the right track. With no further ado, I would like to invite Antonio Villafranca on stage, the Director of Research of ISPI. Please, Antonio, join me on stage. And our colleague Shuva from the Center for Energy, Environment and Water of India. Please, Shuva, to share a few insights and closing remarks as per the aspects of the G20. This will be kind of follow-up and conclusions of the last segment of our panel discussion, and then hear a few closing remarks for today's workshop from Holger Kühle. So who would like to start first? Maybe we will go from you, Antonio. Ladies first. No. Ladies first, always, but Antonio's first, so that we can talk about Italy's legacy, and then we can jump towards the G20. The three eyes, yes, absolutely. So, Antonio, the floor is yours, but briefly.
I'm too Italian for this, I had to do it.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for this invitation. Well, making a comment now on the prospects of the G20 is extremely complicated, especially if you put everything in perspective. Let's go back to 1 year ago. 1 year ago was quite a successful year for multilateralism. There was optimism. The optimism was there because we were thinking that no other major lockdowns around the world was taking place. Today we know that that is not the case. We see what is happening in China, and there were good economic prospects. The very motto of the G20 Indonesia is recover together, recover stronger. We don't even know if there is going to be a recovery anymore. Which is quite paradoxical, I know. So last year was a very peculiar year. It was an optimistic year, and some, in the field of energy transition and green transition, some results and achievements were achieved. The G20 in particular paved the way to the COP26. Made a sort of a political platform and pre-agreements upon which the COP26 built. So let me just mention some of the results which were achieved last year, both by the G20 and COP26. The phase down, even if not the phase out of coal, carbon neutrality for the EU, the US, and many other countries by 2050, with the exception of China, by 2050 by the first group, and then 2060 for China, and 2007 for India. The commitment to keep the rise of temperature under 1.5 degrees Celsius by the turn of the century, and 30% reduction of methane emissions by 2030. 2030. In addition, 145 countries, including Brazil, pledged to halt and reverse deforestation by 2030, and circular economy, and particularly carbon circular economy, was included in the final communiqué of the G20 as one, not the only, of course, but one of the available options, also with a view to increasing energy efficiency. Well, to be sure, even if all these commitments were met, scientific evidence said that by the end of the century, the rise in temperature is going to be between 2.5 and 2.7 degrees Celsius. So, in any case, this is not enough, and it's not true. Even if all these commitments were met and implemented by all the states, 1.5 degrees Celsius is not going to be the real target. So, of course, we have to raise the ambition of global targets in the environmental field. And Team 20 Italy did it last year, and I'm very glad to say that Team 20 Indonesia did this year as well, because they built upon the pillars of the Team 20, of course, Japan, Saudi Arabia, and Italy. When it comes to Italy, what we suggest as Team 20 Italy is, first, set a common international taxonomy of sustainability and standards, establish a green rating agency to support sustainable finance. These two options have been taken also by the Team 20 Indonesia. I had the pleasure to read in advance the final communiqué, the draft of the final communiqué of Team 20 Indonesia, and they are building on this idea and inviting the G20 to choose also an international institution which could develop this rating agency and this international taxonomy, just the way we did during the financial crisis with the Financial Stability Board. So this is the idea. Okay, at first, this idea was a technical idea. Now we can implement it, and the Team 20 is asking the G20 to fully implement it. And it's very telling also that during the Italian G20 and Team 20, the decision was taken to upgrade the task force, the G20 task force on sustainable finance. Now there is a working group on sustainable finance, which is a key issue in my view today. Let's be very frank. If we really think that we can be successful in financially supporting circular economy, any other objective in the climate field, we need money. And this money cannot come from states. The public debt around the world is now about 100% of the world GDP. In a situation like this, no more money is coming from the state, especially in today's context with rising energy prices, in which, state intervention to subsidize carbon consumption, because this is what is happening today, is very high. So the only way, and this is, and I want to conclude here, really the legacy, if I may say, for the Indian presidency is let's focus specifically on environmental and sustainable financing. That is the key issue. How can we do it? Not only relying on public finances, they will not be enough. We need to engage the private sector, public-private partnership. We need to really define SDG goals in a very clear way. We need to also build a rating agency for green projects and avoid some problems with enterprises, so-called greenwashing, which is the new reality for many companies. So in my view, this is the biggest legacy, of course, in the environmental field, from the Italian G20 and T20 and the Indonesian G20 and T20 for India. Thank you.
Thank you very much for, I would say, setting or raising the bar and clearly expressing what is at stake in the negotiations. And it was said also during today's panel that in fact the environment ministers could not reach an agreement, right? Just a few days ago here in Bali, in July, the finance
we run the
ministers,
risk that no agreement will be reached at the G20 summit.
Yes, and in July at the G20 finance meeting, there was not such a shared communique. There was a chairperson summary. So clearly there are some issues, and the role of the G20 this year might be very, very different from last year, as also one of a trusted place, right, for high-level convening and not just pushing recommendations and policy briefs, but highlighting to governments what is really important, having in mind also what was achieved, what was not achieved, and the results of past cycles of the G20, right? In that regard, the role of the G20 and or leaders in the G20 is extremely important. Thank you very much, Antonio Villafranca. I will turn to my neighbor from India to highlight a few hints, and not legacy of the G20 India, but maybe just a few perspectives, especially as per what you have heard today regarding the issue of circular economy, and maybe just introduce yourself and what your organization is doing. Shubha, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. I'm Shubha Raha. I head new initiatives at an Indian think tank called the Council on Energy, Environment and Water. It's called CEW. Specific to the G20 process, we're advising multiple ministries of the government of India as we firm up our issues. And that includes the Ministry of Finance, which is working on the finance track, and multiple ministries of the Sherpa track, which includes the Renewable Energy Ministry, the Ministry of Power, the Ministry of External Affairs, which interestingly has taken a deep interest in the Sustainable Development Agenda, the SDGs for this time, and also some other line ministries such as the Ministry of Environment, Climate and Forests, and so on and so on. So I want to say at the outset that the issues that are being developed are very, very tightly linked with what has happened in the past G20s, going back to at least the past 5 to 6 G20s, with specific focus on sustainability, which we think will be one of the main 2-3 pillars that India comes up with for sure, along with digitalization, because India has had a very, very successful run of using digital services to for the masses to kind of deliver public goods and services. But I'm going to focus a little bit on what we have been discussing on the sustainability side, and I'm going to just echo the importance of the Sustainable Finance Working Group, because for the first time, the Ministry of Finance has made priorities 1 and 3 out of 5 on sustainable finance, starting with a focus on scaling up blended finance, which includes things like transition finance, risk insurance, the private sector, which is obviously going to be very, very important because again, India also, for example, has been financing much of its sustainability with public funds, clearly not enough. But we also have a renewable energy sector that's mostly funded by equity and debt markets. So we have a lot of experience in raising foreign investment, but at the same time, we're also cognizant that the foreign investment that's coming into the global south is concentrated mostly in China, to some extent in India, and is not going to any of the other countries in scale. So how do we address that? So the SIDS LDC will continue to be a part of this conversation. Another priority that the Sustainable Finance Working Group might take up is pooling funds for resilience building of infrastructure, as well as creating a reserve fund, if you will, for shocks like the pandemic, that we can maybe at a G20 level have some sort of reserve funds. So these are kind of the preliminary ideas from this area. We also have we are also working with the Prime Minister's office on something called the LIFE principles, which was introduced at COP26 by our Prime Minister, which stands for Lifestyles for Environment. And this relates to the idea of responsible production and consumption, which then feeds into other themes of circular economy and resource efficiency. So this would include, as far as I can tell, the one, of course, the nudging the behavior of individuals, but not be limited to that point, and to make it a global movement. if everybody does move towards sustainability, then the markets would change. So how do you get new market mechanisms, new market structures? And related to that, I touched upon it throughout the conversation, is redefining prosperity or redefining GDP-based systems. Or I think Konstantin, you said that the circular economy is a type of economy that is not dependent on the finances, the GDP-based system. So maybe we'll look into some of those issues. I mean, this is not a part of the ministerial communique, but we want to introduce some of these concepts into the G20. And specifically related to circular economy, we have we're looking at the resource efficiency and circular economies of some hard-to-abate sectors such as steel, moving away from the commonly discussed plastic. We're not moving away. I mean, we're evolving it a bit more, I would say. We also might be looking at an extended producer responsibility that is sector agnostic and have it accepted at the G20 level that for other industries and not just plastic, we look at EPR systems. So how do we frame a broad guidelines that apply across sectors? We may also propose, we're thinking of this, a G2B platform for resource efficient circular economy that involves the governments, but also the non-state actors, which is your industry and civil society, to find out specific solutions. We would also be looking at circular bioeconomy, as far as I can say, and I mean that for us relates to jobs, growth, sustainability, waste management, MSW, all sorts of things, because India, and then Brazil, and then South Africa. I mean, we are all have significant agrarian economies that can feed into this. This blue economy, ocean-based actions, another priority area. Also biodiversity, land degradation, and terrestrial water, and that's the river systems, the lake system, and so on, which is different from the coastal and marine systems. So these are all going to be focus areas. Coming to the energy side, we are going to have addressing the technology gaps, because one of the biggest problems that we're having with any solution is that we don't have the financing, but also not the technology ownership in the global south to push through things such as the electrolyzer ecosystem, for example. If you're talking hydrogen, because on one side we're talking all these plants, and India also has a hydrogen mission, but where is the supply chain of that? Which links to the other important area is the energy security and the security of supply chains for critical minerals and renewables, securing those, especially now that we have actually experienced some serious supply chain shocks, so including semiconductors and all that. So the global attention is primed to focus on this. We'll also look at adopting energy efficiency and responsible consumption, and the just transition, of course, continues to be a conversation, including for distributed renewable energy, which for us and for many SIDS, LDCs, and developing nations, we feel DRE would be the solution rather than utility scale grids and so on and so forth. And finally, just to wrap this up, from the development working group, which is another group that we're advising, we are looking at, again, bringing the blended finance in for SDGs, where we're not talking instruments, but we're talking how do we actually have blended finance injected to achieve the SDGs for 2030? Because we all know that, I mean, the funds have dried up for it. So how do we mobilize the political will to recommit to SDGs? In the same line, on the development, energy, climate trinity, we are looking at reforming multilateralism to achieve the SDGs, and that would, to my mind, again, be a focus area. So this is roughly where we are from these things. We don't know where the trade working group is going. That will also play, because supply chains and all are dependent on that. But this is broadly.
Thank you very much for these insights about the G20 machinery, right? And that concludes this closing remarks regarding the T20, G20 Italy legacy and G20 T20 Indian perspectives. Thank you very much. You may stay on stage, and we will hear the closing remarks, closing notes from our dear colleague Holger Köhler in Berlin. Holger, are you online? Are you still awake? Are you still with us?
I am here. Hello.
He's still awake.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
We can hear you, and you are wearing green, so that's perfect. Holger,
Okay, good.
I know you have been following very attentively this whole series of insights and discussions we have had since the very beginning of the day. I will not summarize them. You were there with us, but please share briefly, according to general issues, G20 issues, circular economy perspectives, your experience, what we are doing together, your, I would say, conclusions or recommendations for this session and its aftermath. Thank you very much again for joining us.
Hello to everybody. I'm very happy to be here, at least remotely. I would love to be in Bali, but so I called it from Berlin. And what I try is somehow to wrap up, but it's an attempt. Please be generous intellectually, emotionally, if I don't mention everything that has been said. My takeaways in a very generic manner, I took some notes, are the following. There's obviously consensus. Without circular economy, it's impossible to achieving net zero and mitigating climate crisis. Circular economy is not a choice, but a must. That's fine. That's a consensus so far. The circularization of our economies must happen globally, or it will not be. It seems also here is consensus. There is nothing less than a transformation. It was said it's not just a transition, Anbu said that, it's rather a transformation of and within our economies. It will transform relationships between stakeholders, the cooperation as a new normal, and not this a never-ending, let's say, obsession about competition. So cooperation is a new normal. It will transform relationships between production and natural resources, extracting as an exception rather, extracting as an exception, and reuse of materials as a norm. While the goal of this transformation would be the same in every country, at least in those countries who commit to circular economy, the political economy, that's also obvious, I would say, from that discussion. The political economy capacities and challenges differ from country to country. There are countries still struggling to ensure waste collection, basically. Waste management isn't in place. Or they want to reach recycling, which is a valid goal to achieve recycling. Also in terms of, let's say, circular economy, it's still a sort of downcycling at the end. And there are already countries, at least discussions in some countries, now aiming to reach the upcycling. So yesterday I was, for instance, in a debate, there were some, they said, okay, we have to better organize our landfills, and others said, no. If we really want to achieve a circular economy, there shouldn't be any landfill left. So that's a huge debate, and we can even see how this is stretching. Of course, there are those who say we need landfills because we have some toxic ingredients. To manage them, we need landfills. And then there's also an industry in some countries organizing, earning money from landfills. And others say, no, we have to stop, we close them. Otherwise, we would never achieve the circularity. That just to illustrate this huge, let's say, difference between countries and realities. And there's an international and globally engaged agency, GIZ, is active in many countries, especially also in Indonesia, about those topics, in Malaysia, in Thailand, especially in the ASEAN region. We know that structural changes must be accompanied by economic and social development strategies, which is difficult to do because, again, there are so many different national circumstances, and those many realities we deal with and we come from might provoke the loss of orientation, as Konstantinos said at the beginning, making it difficult to pin down where it is likely to go next. And discussions like the one today allow us, I would say, at least somehow to kind of map the journey. And I just want to speak about some changes that came into my mind listening to your discussions. There is something about changing the rules something about change through rational decision-making, changing the narrative. Changing the rules means there is need of regional regulatory initiatives. Konstantinos mentioned that, Anbu mentioned that, and there are some initiatives like the European Union now to set standards and attract followers, aligning them to global efforts, integrate circular economy in trade agreements, integrate circularity assessment and reporting into monitoring principles of large companies, and adequate mechanisms to lower stages of value chains. For instance, EPR, now it was just mentioned by Shuva, the extended producer responsibility as an approach, and ownership should become the new normal, and not only about plastics, but on the broad range of materials. Also, the certification of circular economy was mentioned. But there are different needs between global North and global South, and this is something, of course, G20 and T20 especially, is the arena to discuss those differences and how to harmonize. Then, apropos the change through rational decisions, there is a need of a new, I would call it a new Basel Convention. Anju mentioned the de-risking circular economy options for companies and countries having a stake in the upstream segment, for instance. There is the need to use tax and price policies to increase profitability of circular economy-based products. It was now mentioned by Antonio that so far the, let's say, fossil fuel-based economies are somehow stabilized by subventions. And how to turn now those subventions into subventions of the circular economy remains a huge challenge and needs to be put at the agenda. And then changing the narrative. That was something Caroline reminds us, from waste to resources. We still speak, if we use the terminology, and wording is so important, as we know, we speak about waste, but we don't, so it's a sort of, let's say, a very negative description we give, but we should use the term of resources. Widely and similarly conceived circular economy, terminology, and labeling is an issue. Then it's a changing of knowledge, change towards a contextualized transition, and a change as inclusive process. Changing the knowledge, Anbu reminds us we need somehow sectoral deep dives, revise hard skills, soft skills, and so on. So it's also, let's say, it starts in our universities and it finishes in our, let's say, daily businesses, be it in banks, in my own organization, International Development Agency, or also in business promotion and public authorities. And then, as our colleague from Den Haag, from the Netherlands, Caroline and Noura also talked about, it's a change, we need a change towards a contextualized transition. Localizing circular economy adaptation is key, and we need to empower local processes and stakeholders. And last but not least, that was something Moekti at the very beginning mentioned, the very important issue of socioeconomic dimension. It's not just about technology, it's not just about finance, it's also about how, to what extent people, their, let's say, surviving conditions are challenged. So we have to include also all those issues of socioeconomic changes and job creation and so on. Again, circularization of our economies will be or must happen globally, or it will not be. It will not happen. And then I would like to remind what Isabella Teixeira mentioned in her statement. Nicola shared with us this very morning. She said we need to build on regional and global efforts, such as GACERE, invented by the European Union, or the ASEAN Economic Recovery Framework, to develop actively processes at large scale. And the main message she shared with us, Isabella, is we must consider all options to develop circular economy. And I would say that's the major message. We have to consider all options, as our realities between countries are so different. And the area, the place to do that is by definition the G20 and T20. Thank you very much.
Holger, thank you very much. One round of applause for Holger, from Antonio, and from Shuva. And I'll pass it on to our dear MC. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Nicolas. As we have come to the end of the event, we would like to convey our sincere gratitude to all of the speakers and moderators for sharing their valuable expertise with us today. And of course, to all guests who are tuning in both online and offline. For all guests who are here with us at Hilton Bali, we are very pleased to share with you a dinner voucher at the Grain Restaurant starting from 7 p.m. today. My colleague Abigail will hand out the voucher for you just right outside of this room. Thank you and see you at our next event. This event is now closed. Thank you.
Recording stopped.